Immortality, a blessing, a curse, a philosophical debate, and a biological reality for some animals. We've attached a lot of heavy-handed ideas to immortality, but for some, it's just how they exist. Now, that existence may not be as riveting as that of a rock star vampire or a mopey modern-day god, but they probably still have to put up with a lot of stuff that we don't, like the odd scientist poking and prodding them every decade or so. Check it out. Take, for instance, the tardigrade. Tardigrades have been the poster boy for experimental biology for a few years now, hence the cute nickname of water bears. It's a lot easier for a daytime newscaster to say water bear, you know? Now, the water bear, the water bear is not an extremophile. It doesn't thrive in extremes where others die, but it can survive in almost any environment. Extreme temperatures, lack of food, lack of water, even lack of air will simply cause the tardigrade to enter a state of biological suspension until the environment improves. Part of the reason they've earned their pseudo-immortal title is that tardigrades have survived on the moon after a science vessel crash. That's right, these are an animal that survived exposure in space, a title that no other known animal can tout. While water bears can endure space, they can't live in it. As I said, they aren't extremophiles. But Deinococcus radiodurans is nicknamed Conan the Bacterium, which I'm grateful for because it's funny, but more because the official name is hard to say. Conan here holds the Guinness World Record for the toughest known bacterium, which is impressive on multiple fronts, considering it had to submit the paperwork to be put in the book. Jokes aside, Conan can survive being frozen, placed in acid, and complete dehydration. And those aren't even its most impressive feats. Conan was discovered during experiments that were using gamma rays to prevent food from spoiling by killing the bacterium. But Conan survived. This particular strain of bacterium can survive up to 5,000 GY of radiation. For comparison, it only takes 5 GY to kill a human. And interestingly enough, it takes 4,000 GY to kill a water bear. That's what makes Conan an extremophile. While others survive, it thrives. But what if instead of enduring the harshest conditions imaginable, you could simply shrug it off? What if you were simply unkillable? Wouldn't that be much more like the immortality we're talking about? Superpower immortality, right? Well, there are animals that have that too. They would be just a tad less impressive as a superhero. The flatworm has amazing regenerative abilities. It can heal itself from wounds, doesn't age, and if it's ever separated into pieces, each distinct piece becomes a new flatworm. Experiments have been carried out where a flatworm's head is bisected, and the flatworm will continue to live with 2 healthy heads. Flatworms also have been shown to be able to recall memories after having their head removed and growing a new one. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds pretty cool. I know what you're thinking. Worms? Microorganism? Where's all the cool immortal stuff? Well, don't worry, because now I'm going to talk about sea sponges. Wait, no. I promise, they're really cool. Because we have no idea how long some sponges have been alive. Sponges like coral reefs grow at a very consistent rate of 0.2 millimeters per year. They found sponges equal to a meter in size. Don't worry, I'll do the math for you. That means these sponges are about 5,000 years old. And when scientists study sponges, they find they only live a few years under observation. So we don't know how they're able to live that long or obtain that size. Nature is wild. Turns out we have a pretty rough track record when it comes to figuring out how long stuff in the ocean lives, because the sponges were only just the beginning. It took us a few decades to realize that Greenland sharks, one of the largest species of sharks, had extreme lifespans. When one sample was captured and carbon dated, they found that the oldest shark had a lifespan range of 392 years, plus or minus 120. Now, maybe they aren't unkillable or biologically immortal, but I put them on this list because, frankly, we don't actually know how long they live. And they live in deep water, so there might be some old sharks down there. Interestingly enough, much like coral and sponges, the Greenland shark also grows at a consistent rate as it ages. So those really old sharks are probably really big. There's a fun thought. Very similar, but slightly less intimidating, are lobsters. All lobsters, actually. If you've seen a lobster, that lobster was immortal. Chances are you've seen a lobster on a plate, which is kind of a real ego trip of a meal, eating an immortal. Lobsters don't stop growing, like a few of the other immortal creatures on this list, but not just a factor of size. They never stop growing in a growing up sense. The chemicals in their body never disperse with old age, and in fact, older lobsters are more fertile than younger ones. Lobsters really got the immortality wonder deal. Eternal youth, baby! That's what I'm talking about. So what ends up finally slowing the lobster down? Well, they have shells, and as they grow, they need to molt into new shells, which is a high-energy, dangerous process. Eventually, a lobster will grow too big to safely molt and die of exhaustion or infection. It's a real bummer, too, because whenever it happens, they are always in the prime of their life. Completely unavoidable. Hydras, a very simple little polyp creature, kind of get the best of both worlds. They do not age at all, like lobsters, and they have unlimited regenerative capabilities, like flatworms. There really isn't a downside. They are wiggly little creatures that live their immortal little lives in the ocean, and that's really all they do. They reproduce asexually, they use their little tentacles to grab food and bring it back into their stock, and they're friendly with some varieties of algae. Because who doesn't like friends? And that's it. Sort of speaks to a beautiful simplicity in a way. They set out to survive, and that's what they do. And in the right conditions, they will simply never stop doing it. Forever and ever. Unaging and unworrying as the clock ticks loudly around us, reminding you constantly that, unlike the simple Hydra, your time in this world is short. What was I talking about? Oh yes, immortal animals. I actually wanted to mention an animal with immortal in its name, and it's not meant to be a misleading name like barking deer, which they only kind of bark, but is actually immortal. The immortal jellyfish. Actually a close-ish relative of the Hydra, so maybe the ability to circumvent death is like a family tradition? The immortal jellyfish, like most everything else on this list, can die. It just has a way of not dying really well. See, in extreme conditions, the jellyfish will react reflexively, like a tardigrade. But it doesn't go into a stasis state. No, it just ages backward. It'll enter a different stage of its development that is easier to sustain, namely a polyp, until such times as the environment is beneficial again. So anytime that being an adult jellyfish stops being a good thing, they can just be a baby again, thus repeating its life cycle without limit. Immortality at its simplest. I really wasn't going to bring up this last animal because it freaks me out too much, but I know this is a place of learning no matter how gross it is, so here goes. See, I brought up several times that we don't actually know how old some animals get. Like sharks or sponges. We simply have a hard time seeing them live in the wild without dying of something. Nature is brutal like that, but there are some animals that theoretically might not die of old age. Like spiders, unfortunately. Yes, we have never, in all the history of mankind, ever observed a spider dying of old age. Pet tarantulas have been documented living into their 30s. The longest ever lived spider was recorded at 43. Her name was affectionately number 16, and she ended up accidentally dying from a wasp sting, much to the lamentation of the team studying her. On one hand, I think spiders are gross. On the other, they met that spider in the 70s and it died in 2018. That spider was a relative at that point. But yeah, spiders. Not a lot of documentation of them aging, and when they die, it's usually not of old age. I'll admit there is a bit of flawed logic in this observation based on many human reactions to spiders when they see them, but still, it's a question we don't have the answer to, and even if it creeps me out, I want to share the mysteries of nature with you. What do you think? Is biological immortality just a way for humans to point and look and say, someday that'll be us? Or is there an important facet of science to be found in studying animals that don't age? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more geriatric animal facts.